Luo Feng reached the bottom, 34th layer of the destruction world, an achievement that made him the first among the many ancestors and lords in the endless primordial space to arrive there. He met the world envoy of this final layer, a robed figure possessing wisdom and the ability to communicate, unlike the world envoys of the previous 33 layers, which acted mainly through instinct. This world envoy had intelligence because it was born from the abyss of destruction. It explained that the abyss of destruction gathered the hatred, killing intent, grievances, and other negative emotions of all creatures, allowing it to observe the ecology of the entire endless primordial space. Although it could not leave the abyss of destruction, its knowledge might even surpass Luo Feng's. It also knew that Luo Feng was a source world life and suggested that the eternal land and fire prison wall might possibly contain similarly wise existences. The world envoy revealed that defeating it would allow Luo Feng to fully control the destruction world. The abyss of destruction was divided into 7 parts of power. The destruction world was the easiest to access, and breaking through all 34 layers would grant control over one part, equivalent to roughly 1/7 of the abyss of destruction's power. The mountain of destruction, which Luo Feng had previously entered, was the core and contained 3 parts of the power. Passing the 6th layer of tests would grant another part, while 2 other parts had not yet been encountered by Luo Feng. Different powerful beings might potentially control different parts, but anyone who ultimately passed all 7 layers of tests and completely controlled the entire abyss of destruction would strip away the power controlled by the others. However, no one had yet mastered even a single part of its power. The world envoy then launched its challenge. Its towering body transformed into endless black mist, which easily annihilated Luo Feng's realm of life and death and completely enveloped him. The black mist exerted terrifying suppression, even against Luo Feng's protective energy layer with the characteristics of immortal and shadow. Under this suppression, the crane leader's power could not spread, preventing Luo Feng from using shadow power to move. Luo Feng immediately unleashed his destruction blade technique, sending countless dazzling blade lights forward in waves that tore through the black mist. However, the world envoy transformed the mist into extremely dense black water, which continuously suppressed and destroyed the blade lights. Luo Feng realized that merely relying on this domain placed him at an extreme disadvantage. With a level of deterrence that would normally require the combined efforts of numerous lords and ancestors, Luo Feng then used the forbidden technique of his destruction blade technique. 1 cut 2 break. 1,080,000,000 primal origins burned intensely, and part of his physical body underwent energy conversion, burning 30% of his energy reserve without self-destruction. Luo Feng condensed himself into an incredibly concentrated blade light. This attack carried the power of all things can be cut and directly split the black water as it advanced toward the shadow of origin. The world envoy praised the power of the strike and condensed a chain from the black water to block it. Luo Feng's blade light severed the chain, but more chains continuously formed in front of him. A total of 34 chains could gather and disperse unpredictably and condense anywhere within the 34th layer. Even after Luo Feng severed hundreds of chains, the power of his blade light gradually weakened. The chains then surrounded and bound his true body. Luo Feng immediately activated the forbidden technique of the primordial battle technique, producing a terrifying explosion that annihilated all 34 chains binding him and destroyed a small area of the surrounding black water. However, because the destruction world continuously supplied power, the black water quickly recovered and 34 new chains condensed once more. Luo Feng realized that even the forbidden primordial battle technique could only destroy a small area. With his power greatly weakened, Luo Feng had no choice but to retreat through space-time to the 33rd layer. His energy reserve had fallen below 20%, and he began recovering. He concluded that the world envoy's black water domain combined with the 34 chains made his other battle techniques, including the primordial battle technique, capable of destroying only limited areas. Only by transforming into blade light and using the forbidden technique could he sever hundreds of chains and advance a certain distance. But once the technique weakened, he would immediately be bound again. Since he was still far from the shadow of origin and the world envoy would likely become even more powerful the closer he approached. Luo Feng understood that the domain and chains were probably only part of the world envoy's abilities, compared with the dark messenger and flame messenger of the 33rd layer, who were comparable to him. The world envoy of the 34th layer completely suppressed him. Unable to find a way to break through the seemingly simple combination of the black water domain and the chains, Luo Feng decided to visit the Mountain of Destruction again. At the hidden Mountain of Destruction, Luo Feng observed the massive pitch-black mountain covered in ink like black mist. 34 luminous points resembling stars were connected across its surface like veins. The world envoy had said that the Mountain of Destruction contained 3 forms of power. Luo Feng observed that it nurtured numerous weapons, destruction fruits, and other treasures, possessed 34 types of destructive power, and contained countless negative emotions. He realized that the Venn diagram formed by the 34 destructive powers represented the evolutionary direction of the life core on the destruction path. He speculated that evolving the life core along this direction to a certain extent might allow one to obtain one of the forms of power within the abyss of destruction. Among the 7 types of power in the abyss of destruction, the power of the destruction world was likely the easiest to access because any primordial lord could enter its outermost layer. Luo Feng carefully observed, touched, and studied the surroundings of the abyss of destruction. The only mountain road entrance to the Mountain of Destruction was blocked by 7 sculptures. And without challenging these 7 sculptures, there was no way to ascend the mountain. Luo Feng studied the Mountain of Destruction for a long time but still could not find a way to obtain the other powers of the abyss of destruction. Since even its partial powers had extremely high screening requirements, he decided to focus on mastering the destruction world first. He was confident because he had not yet exchanged his accumulated destruction fruits for treasures, meaning his strength could still be greatly enhanced. He then challenged the 4th sculpture, the massive cube. Unlike their previous encounter, Luo Feng had now comprehended the primordial blade path and created 5 combat techniques, completely surpassing his former level of power. He deployed the 5 directions life and death reincarnation killing formation, formed from 50 massive blade lights, each containing 1% of his energy reserve. The formation bound and continuously attacked the massive cube, splitting it into 125 smaller cubes and weakening its life spirituality. However, as long as one cube remained intact, the others could recover, so the formation alone was insufficient. Luo Feng therefore entered the formation with the sky-splitting saber and combined the formation with his destruction blade technique. The combined attack shattered all 125 cubes and destroyed the energy core connecting them, allowing him to defeat the 4th sculpture. He then challenged the 5th sculpture, Black Star, but was defeated miserably. As he had expected, Luo Feng next returned to the Mountain of Destruction to exchange his destruction fruits for treasures. After enduring the impacts of hatred, killing intent, resentment, and countless memory scenes, he examined the available treasures. He understood that after exchanging his 4 destruction fruits, he might only be able to accumulate 1 or 2 more before mastering the abyss of destruction. So future exchanges would be far inferior. However, after mastering 2 primordial level Daos of life and death, he had reached a bottleneck, making further improvement through cultivation and comprehension extremely difficult. Therefore, relying on powerful external treasures was his best opportunity to improve. 4 destruction fruits could be exchanged for 3 of the strongest treasures nurtured by the Mountain of Destruction. A black robe that could make the body nearly indestructible. A black sphere capable of creating a black water domain comparable to the primordial beast ancestors domain. And a sharp blade capable of cutting through all matter and energy. Although domain secret treasures were normally considered more valuable than defensive treasures and weapons, Luo Feng chose the blade because it perfectly matched his primordial blade path and the destruction specialty of the Mountain of Destruction. The blade had no fixed form and transformed into his favorite bloodshadow knife. Holding it reminded Luo Feng of his youth, when he had practiced with the weapon in the martial arts hall. Although treasures exchanged from the Mountain of Destruction had to be carried personally and could potentially be taken if the user's body were destroyed, Luo Feng believed that his blade technique combined with the bloodshadow knife would allow him to cut through everything in his path, even if surrounded by 100 ancestors. He then went to the 34th layer of the Abyss of Destruction to test the weapon. The world envoy transformed into endless black mist and countless black water that attempted to suppress Luo Feng from all directions. However, Luo Feng merged with the bloodshadow knife and transformed into an extremely refined blade light. The weapon's ability to cut through all matter and energy greatly reduced the resistance of the black water. And even the condensed chains were silently severed when the world envoy's powerful body attempted to block him. Luo Feng's blade light pierced straight through it, with his own strength combined with the strongest blade nurtured by the abyss of destruction. Luo Feng became nearly unstoppable and quickly reached the shadow of origin. He realized that choosing the blade had been the correct decision because it strengthened his greatest specialty and was also the most useful treasure for mastering the destruction world. After imprinting his thoughts onto the shadow of origin, Luo Feng sensed the true structure of the entire abyss of destruction. He perceived the surface true world, the 34-layer destruction world, the inner spirit world, the sea of destruction, formed from the negative spiritual power accumulated from countless living beings throughout the endless primordial space, and the innermost core, the mountain of destruction. At that moment, Luo Feng became the master of the destruction world and began sensing the various forces throughout the endless primordial space. Luo Feng gained a new understanding of the endless primordial space after perceiving it from the perspective of the abyss of destruction. He realized that the abyss of destruction, the land of eternity, and the fire prison wall were the three major pillars supporting the endless primordial space, with each serving a different but complementary purpose. The fire prison wall continuously radiated energy throughout the endless primordial space, allowing countless creatures to grow and resources to emerge. The land of eternity stabilized the entire space, while the abyss of destruction devoured harmful forces, especially intense negative spiritual power, and also possessed the crucial function of destruction. When the number of creatures and the overall burden became too great and threatened the stability of the endless primordial space, the abyss of destruction could unleash the power it had accumulated over endless ages, creating a massive catastrophe that might kill 9/10 of the innate primordial life. Cause the large-scale destruction of ancestors below the undying and undying level, and severely damage even the source worlds. This destruction was essentially a form of self-cleansing for the endless primordial space. Although no such eruption had occurred since its birth because the burden had never reached a sufficient level, Luo Feng understood that once a master of the abyss of destruction appeared, they could periodically cleanse the endless primordial space instead of allowing the abyss to unleash all its accumulated power at once. The master could only borrow part of the abyss of destruction's power after leaving it, making the destructive force far weaker and allowing the cleansing to be controlled. This was beneficial for both the abyss of destruction and the endless primordial space, since releasing all the accumulated power at once would greatly deplete the abyss. Luo Feng also realized that the abyss of destruction had divided its power into 7 parts, allowing up to 7 candidates to compete for mastery. As one of these candidates, he controlled the 34th layer of the destruction world, but other powerful ancestors or lords could still descend layer by layer and challenge him. If they defeated him and the world envoy in the 34th layer, they could seize control and obtain the authority to master the destruction world. However, Luo Feng possessed the advantage of being the first to occupy the area. After obtaining weapons, he could avoid the world envoy's obstruction, and after mastering the destruction world, he held an overall advantage over the world envoy. Any latecomer would have to face both the world envoy and Luo Feng, making the challenge much more difficult. However, Luo Feng could not expel hostile ancestors from the destruction world. Although he had mastered the destruction world, he had only left a mark on the shadow of origin in the 34th layer. And the shadow of origin was merely a strand of power from the core of the abyss of destruction. His authority was granted by the abyss, and only after fully refining the core of the abyss of destruction could he truly become its master. The candidates closest to him were currently only at the 26th and 27th layers, leaving a considerable gap. After understanding the secrets of the abyss of destruction, Luo Feng decided that he would no longer give Sha Zhou any destruction fruits, even if he obtained more in the future. 2 destruction fruits had already caused a significant evolution in Sha Zhou's strength, and giving her another might cause a qualitative change in her life core. He saw no reason to deliberately cultivate a potential opponent, especially since promises made by ancestors could not always be trusted. Throughout history, friendships and promises had been abandoned whenever time or camp interests change. Luo Feng therefore concluded that relying on others was unreliable and that one's own strength remained the most trustworthy foundation. At the deepest layer of the abyss of destruction, he established a cave mansion where one of his avatars remained for a long period, continuously perceiving the fluctuating power of the abyss. Meanwhile, the Starlight Lord observed countless future timelines through his many avatars, When different future possibilities collapsed, he realized that he could no longer observe Luo Feng in any future timeline. Previously, only the hermit had been impossible for him to observe, but Luo Feng had now become another exception. Starlight Lord speculated that Luo Feng might have obtained some special power from the abyss of destruction. Since even the slightest interference from that highest-tier mysterious land could make observation extremely difficult. Regardless of the reason, he believed that Luo Feng had definitely become stronger. Soon afterward, Luo Feng left detailed information about the abyss of destruction in the land of origin for Yuan, Jin, Wulin, Ming Huang, Nai Ji Yu, Starlight, and Moman. He explained that controlling the abyss of destruction required passing 7 layers of tests, making it extremely difficult. The abyss contained 7 powers. The surface true world, the destruction world, contained 1 power and was currently under Luo Feng's control. The inner spirit world, the sea of destruction, contained 2 powers. The core mountain of destruction contained 3 powers, and after passing the 6th layer of tests, one could obtain another power. The latter 6 powers remained unclaimed, and their exact thresholds were unknown. Luo Feng shared this information in the hope that another lord from the cultivator camp might eventually become a chosen candidate. The information shocked the other lords, and all 8 lords gathered in the land of origin to discuss it. Jin stated that controlling the surface destruction world was comparatively the easiest path. Yet one still had to break through all 34 layers. He had only reached the 13th layer, showing that possessing a single primordial level Dao was clearly insufficient to impress the abyss of destruction. Luo Feng also acknowledged that even though he had mastered 2 primordial level Daos of life and death, fully controlling the abyss of destruction remained far beyond his reach, and obtaining even one of its powers was already extremely fortunate. The first occupier also possessed a major advantage, meaning that even later challengers with equal strength would find it difficult to control a single power. Nai Ji Yu believed that after Luo Feng mastered the destruction world, his strength had increased significantly, making their previous plan for territorial expansion too conservative. However, Ming Huang suggested waiting for Yuan to break through before discussing the matter further. Luo Feng agreed, because Yuan's breakthrough would greatly enhance the overall strength of the cultivator camp. If Yuan's primordial rule operation path underwent another transformation, it could coordinate the strength of all 8 lords more effectively and significantly increase their combined combat power. Luo Feng believed that his own plan would then proceed more smoothly. While Yuan confidently stated that his breakthrough was coming soon, more than 200,000 epochs passed in the blink of an eye. Yet Yuan remained in secluded cultivation. For Yuan, this period was still extremely short. While Luo Feng had spent less than 20,000 epochs progressing from an eternal true god to becoming the foremost existence in the endless primordial space. During this time, Luo Feng's homeland, the source world, underwent enormous development. The land of origin had expanded to a vast territory containing 360,000 primal chaos prefectures of different sizes. Since the lifespan of a true god was only 30,000 epochs, more than 200,000 epochs were enough for countless creatures to be born. While many formerly desolate and remote regions were developed and filled with new cities. In Zhentan Primal Chaos Prefecture, Marquis Zhentan reflected on his extraordinary fortune. By simply following the traditions of the Yuan River lineage and leaving behind a legacy, he had unexpectedly changed the fate of the entire lineage across 192 generations. All 192 past successors of the Yuan River, along with their closest relatives, had been resurrected, allowing the entire lineage to exist together in the same era. Zhentan felt especially fortunate that the 193rd Yuan River was Lord Luo Feng, to whom he had passed on his legacy. Among the resurrected generations, only the 3rd generation ancestor and the 192nd Yuan River, Zhentan himself, received special favor from Luo Feng. The 3rd generation ancestor's legacy had greatly helped Luo Feng, while Zhentan had been the one who passed on the teachings. The other past generations received cultivation resources and were left to forge their own paths. Although even these resources greatly excited them, Zhentan himself received a fief in a primal chaos prefecture, an extremely valuable reward in the modern land of origin, where even godly kings required multiple approvals to obtain a fief. With the resources he received, he continued advancing toward the primal chaos realm. The 3rd generation ancestor, Juyi god Kane received not only a fief but also a cave mansion in Galaxy capital city and numerous valuable resources. Zhenten understood that the Duan-Dong River lineage ended with Lord Luo Feng. Since he was the 192nd successor and Luo Feng was the 193rd. There would be no 194th Duan-Dong River. Although the past Duan-Dong River successors were scattered throughout the land of origin, they remained part of the same lineage, maintained their group identity, communicated with one another, and occasionally gathered together. After more than 200,000 epochs, 5 of the 192 past Duan-Dong River successors had become godly kings, making the lineage a formidable force in the land of origin. The infinite world, the first world born in the endless primordial space, contains countless clouds in its sky, each corresponding to a source world. Its endless black soil is inhabited by countless descendants of the world-level primordial class Infinite Great Serpent clan, who emerge from the ground to observe the surrounding primordial space. The Infinite Serpents are deeply dissatisfied with Luo Feng because he immediately kills anyone who dares to devour a source world, including members of their own clan. Even the Infinite Great Serpent clan, one of the leading tribes of the foremost camp and possessing the Infinite Snake ancestor along with more than a dozen ancestor-level existences, does not dare to confront him. After Luo Feng severely injured the Inference Fire ancestor with a single slash and occupied the 34th layer of the Abyss of Destruction, surpassing all ancestors in strength, the ancestors became even more cautious. Although they secretly communicated and were dissatisfied with Luo Feng's continued hunting of source world devourers for more than 20 million epochs, they still did not dare to launch a collective war, since this period was only equivalent to a single cultivation session for them. They decided to endure for the time being and let other ancestors test Luo Feng's true strength first. In the Galaxy territory, formerly known as the Blood Crane territory, Luo Feng cultivated alone amid endless blood waves, frequently practicing his blade techniques. He wore a black robe woven from 70% power of Destruction World and 30% Crane Leader's power, combining the destructive nature of the former with the undying and shadow-related characteristics of the latter, which benefited movement and defense. After more than 20 million epochs of cultivation, Luo Feng still found comprehending a third primordial level Dao extremely difficult. Apart from the life and death Dao, he chose to focus on the path of matter. He had exchanged for the sharpest weapon and, after mastering the Destruction World, could barely defeat the fifth of the 7 sculptures. He estimated that completely defeating all 7 sculptures would require mastering 3 primordial level paths. Along with some external assistance, Luo Feng sent countless avatars into source worlds containing the path of matter to study and comprehend its various branches. After more than 20 million epochs, he finally comprehended all the branches and began integrating them, reaching the second realm of godly Kane. Fully integrating the branches would form the complete path of matter and lead to the ultimate realm of godly Kane, which was considered the first and easiest stage because the path of matter within the source world origin could serve as a reference. The second stage required advancing through darkness until reaching the half-step primordial level, while the third stage involved advancing from the half-step primordial level to the primordial material path. The difficulty of the third stage was more than 1 billion times greater than that of the first 2 stages. Luo Feng therefore understood why Ming Huang, Jin, and Wulin had struggled to advance in their second primordial level Dao. He was not impatient and believed that with endless time, even seemingly slow progress could eventually produce enormous results over billions or hundreds of billions of epochs. In the land of origin, Yuan finally achieved a major breakthrough after endless years of cultivation. His foundation in the primordial rule operation path had become fully established, and he only needed to continue comprehending more great Dao. The primordial rule operation path externally involved the operation of rules, while internally it required constructing an origin. Luo Feng's origin system from the primordial life and death Dao had solved many of Yuan's difficulties, allowing him to fully comprehend and integrate his own origin system into the primordial rule operation path. This marked the perfection stage, after which only further refinement was necessary. Yuan believed that his strength had finally reached a level comparable to Sha Zhou's. Although he was not as strong in direct combat as Sha Zhou and was primarily skilled in formation, he was now confident that he could directly match her. Yuan immediately informed the other 7 lords of his breakthrough, causing great excitement throughout the cultivator camp. Luo Feng possessed overwhelming individual strength, while Yuan's strength in formation could enhance the combined power of all the lords, greatly improving the camp's overall combat capability. At the council hall of the Land of Origin, the 8 lords gathered to discuss Yuan's breakthrough. Yuan stated that his direct combat strength was roughly comparable to Sha Zhou and Starlight, causing the others to laugh and envy his progress. He explained that he had cultivated for the longest time and believed the others would eventually break through after cultivating for a similar length of time. The lords then discussed their next plan, expanding the cultivator camp's territory and protecting more source worlds. Niji Yu explained that Luo Feng had spent more than 20,000 millennia traversing the endless primordial space, killing source world devourers and deterring innate primordial life. But the ancestors could endure for a period of time and would eventually erupt. Therefore, the best strategy was to occupy a large territory and make the source worlds within it officially belong to the cultivator camp, forcing the innate primordial lives to give up. The lords debated the scale of expansion. Jin proposed expanding to at least 8,000 world groups, while Mo Man believed 6,000 world groups would already be an achievement. Ming Huang and Starlight also felt that 8,000 world groups would create excessive pressure and be difficult to defend, potentially forcing the Ice Peak Camp and Innate Primordial Camp to form an alliance against them. Luo Feng then proposed occupying 5,000 world groups. However, he added that the Innate Primordial Camp, Ice Peak Camp, and other forces would have to compensate for the smaller territorial expansion by handing over all source worlds within their territories to the cultivator camp for governance. Yuan immediately became excited upon hearing this, as controlling all the source worlds was precisely his ultimate objective. Ming Huang agreed that the cultivator camp had been too cautious and, with its current strength, could completely occupy all the source worlds in the endless primordial space. Luo Feng pointed out that while the cultivator camp mainly needed source worlds, innate primordial life forms valued all kinds of evolutionary resources, with source worlds being only one category. Wulin proposed focusing solely on source worlds and abandoning other resources, since many innate primordial life races did not need source worlds as much. Yuan agreed that this would greatly reduce their hostility and divide their forces. If the cultivator camp expanded to occupy everything, the innate primordial camp, Ice Peak camp, and weaker forces might unite. But if it only demanded the source worlds, many races would have no reason to fight desperately. Luo Feng also stated that the lords mainly pursued enlightenment, while other evolutionary resources were of little use to them, making it unnecessary to turn all undying existences against the cultivator camp. Starlight Lord then showed a region of the endless primordial space comparable to the cultivator camp's current territory. Luo Feng explained that this region contained 1,600 world groups and had the second highest world group density after their current territory. Once occupied, the cultivator camp would control 2/10 of the valuable territory in the endless primordial space, which would be sufficient to provide resources for future generations. Although the territory had large barren dark areas that made establishing a space-time network more difficult, the lords agreed that it had to be occupied to sufficiently threaten the innate primordial camp. Yuan proposed giving the innate primordial camp 2 choices: hand over all source worlds or face continued territorial expansion. Starlight Lord believed they would likely choose to surrender the source worlds, although the Infinite Great Serpent clan would fiercely resist because the source world origin was its greatest need. Mo Man stated that as long as the innate primordial species were divided internally, the resistance of the Infinite Great Serpent clan alone would not have a major impact. The plan was therefore to first occupy the 1,600 world groups to intimidate the innate primordial camp and other forces, then negotiate by offering to stop further expansion in exchange for all source worlds. All 8 lords agreed, and Yuan asked Starlight Lord to perfect the detailed plan before the operation began. While waiting, Yuan proposed rehearsing their cooperative techniques and creating formations suited to all 7 other lords. The 8 lords used only weak avatars with 1/10 of their energy reserves to practice in the Land of Origin, since the mysterious land could not withstand the full force training of their main avatars. The rehearsal astonished the other 7 lords with Luo Feng's strength, while Yuan's formations had also reached an incredible level, becoming even more perfect and maximizing their collective power. This greatly increased the lords' confidence. In the 20th layer of the Abyss of Destruction, Ice Peak ancestor noticed Yuan entering his lair. Yuan merely said that he was passing by and continued toward deeper layers, leaving Ice Peak ancestor stunned. The Infinite Snake ancestor on the 21st layer and Demon Ruins on the 22nd layer also saw Yuan pass by and enter deeper layers, causing many ancestors in the endless primordial space to begin paying attention to him. The 23rd to 25th layers were ownerless and were guarded by world envoys. However, Yuan advanced calmly with formations covering all directions, causing the world envoys' attacks to be unable to touch him while their attacks became distorted and deviated within the formations. He easily passed through the 23rd and 24th layers and finally left his mark on the Shadow of Origin in the 25th layer. All factions were shocked. Previously, Luo Feng occupied the unique 34th layer. Sha Zhou and Starlight Lord occupied the 27th and 26th layers, while Demon Ruins, the Infinite Snake ancestor, Ice Peak ancestor, Yuan, and others occupied weaker layers. Yet Yuan had now easily conquered the 25th layer. And judging from the battle, he had clearly not used his full strength. Many ancestors were disturbed by the realization that the cultivator camp now occupied 3 of the top 4 positions in direct combat strength. They began questioning whether mastering a primordial level Dao truly provided such a huge advantage. Although the endless primordial space had more than 200 ancestors but only 8 lords. Those 8 lords had become undying and undying after reaching their positions, giving them formidable direct combat strength. Even the weakest among them ranked among the top 20 in strength. Although the united innate primordial ancestors were stronger in terms of numbers and overall power, the individual gap between them and the lords was considerable. In essence, there were 2 major categories of powerful beings: the 8 source world creatures who had cultivated to become lords, and the more than 200 ancestors who had achieved their positions through innate primordial life, including 22 undying and undying existences. Yuan's easy conquest of the 25th layer greatly stimulated the ancestors. When he reached the 27th layer, Sha Zhou watched him approach. She remarked that the little fellow from the past had now caught up with her and challenged him to demonstrate his techniques. A great battle erupted under the observation of numerous ancestors and lords. Sha Zhou remained overwhelmingly powerful, while Yuan's formations were like the heavens and earth, enduring all attacks and counter-attacking. The battle ultimately ended in a draw, with Sha Zhou unable to threaten Yuan through his layers of formations and Yuan unable to harm Sha Zhou. Sha Zhou then asked whether Luo Feng had told Yuan about the destruction fruit. Yuan was surprised. Although he knew about the destruction fruit from Luo Feng's intelligence, he had not known about Sha Zhou's previous proposal. After privately contacting Luo Feng, Yuan learned the full situation and asked Sha Zhou whether she had agreed to fully join the cultivator camp and stand with them forever, even if that meant opposing Ice Peak ancestor and all innate primordial life ancestors. Sha Zhou clarified that she had not agreed to join them, but would fully support them and help deal with the innate primordial camp, while remaining neutral even if the cultivator camp opposed the Ice Peak camp. Yuan understood Sha Zhou well and knew that she was extremely cold-hearted and ruthless, except toward the Ice Mountain. He therefore told her that Luo Feng had already exchanged the destruction fruit for treasures and had none left, then departed. Sha Zhou was shocked, because she could only defeat 2 statues in the Mountain of Destruction, while the third completely overwhelmed her, leaving her unable to obtain another destruction fruit. Kafu's destruction fruit had already been exchanged for battle armor, making Luo Feng's fruit her only hope. Sha Zhou believed that, given Luo Feng's strength in occupying the 34th layer, even if he had exchanged all his destruction fruits for treasures, those treasures might have greatly increased his strength and allowed him to defeat another statue and obtain another fruit. She therefore considered it highly likely that Luo Feng still possessed at least 1 destruction fruit. Back in the land of origin, the 8 lords gathered their main battle avatars. Yuan told Starlight that Sha Zhou had mentioned the destruction fruit to both Luo Feng and himself, and he was concerned because she clearly desired it greatly. Starlight warned Yuan not to let emotions cloud his judgment, explaining that Sha Zhou was cold and ruthless by nature. Even if she obtained 1 destruction fruit, she would still want a second one and would not serve the cultivator camp forever for a single fruit. Luo Feng listened silently. After mastering the destruction world, he had indeed defeated the 5th statue and could still exchange for 1 destruction fruit. But he did not trust Sha Zhou and did not want to cultivate a competitor. Starlight emphasized that their current operation would require them to face many ancestors, including undying and undying beings, and told Yuan not to think too much about Sha Zhou. Everyone agreed and prepared to depart for the 1,600 world groups. Wulin jokingly asked Luo Feng to be ruthless, just as he had been when cutting Wulin in half during their sparring session to experience Luo Feng's blade technique. All things can be cut. Luo Feng assured him that he would be, as killing intent was already building in his heart. He had been extremely restrained while sparring with the lords and, after mastering the destruction world, had not yet fought an opponent at full strength. This operation would finally allow him to fight without restraint. Mo Man looked forward to the battle. While Jin's fighting intent surged, Ming Huang smiled, and Nai Gu's eyes filled with bloodlust. Starlight Lord controlled time and space and carried Yuan, Wulin, Ming Huang, Nai Gu, Starlight, Mo Man, and Luo Feng as the 8 lords departed the land of origin together and headed directly toward their target territory.